few years ago, about a year after my dad got a big promotion from work, my family moved to the suburbs in a much nicer area of town than we had been living in before. We were all extremely happy with the move, and our quality of life went way up. I was 15 back then and eager to make some money for myself. I was getting my driver's license soon, and if I was going to enjoy my freedom to the fullest, I of course was going to need money. So I set about sweet-talking all of the neighboring families, mentioning all of the babysittings I had done in my old neighborhood. I had never done any babysitting before, but I figured they didn't have to know that. Before long, my Friday and Saturday nights were booked solid with babysitting jobs that brought in ridiculous amounts of money for very little work. I typically only had to take care of 1 or 2 kids for a couple of hours before I put them to bed, and I quickly became comfortable with my duties. Most of the jobs were boring, but the Miller kids were always a chore to take care of. The Millers lived in the house directly beside us, and they had identical twin boys that were both nightmares to keep watch of. Their names were Jack and Michael. Jack was a quiet boy, and he was always my favorite between the pair. Michael, on the other hand, was hyperactive and constantly loud. He liked to boss Jack around, and on more than one occasion, I would leave to get a snack ready for the boys or use the bathroom only to come back to Michael trying to beat Jack senseless on the floor. I wouldn't really have thought anything of it. Boys will be boys. But there was just something about the way that Jack interacted with Michael that was off-putting to me. He would cower from him sometimes and shut his eyes. When he did this, Michael would lean down and whisper in his ear. I could never make out what Michael was saying, and the one time I tried to lean in to listen, Michael snapped his head up and stared at me, clearly angry that I was trying to listen. He's just a 5-year-old boy, but something about it gave me the creeps. Jack will talk to him, though, and sometimes they seem to get along well. Always at the end of the night, Jack would beg me not to tell his parents about anything bad that Michael did. A few times I told him that I'd had enough, and that I was telling them anyways, but the look of fear in his eyes after I said it always kept me from it. At the end of the night, his parents would go up to the room that the boys shared, check on them, then come back down to pay me. Then I would leave. I did this probably 12 times for the Millers. A year ago, after a particularly bad night of Michael behaving horribly and tormenting Jack, I decided it was finally time to tell his parents about it. I put the boys to bed and decided not to mention my plans to Jack. When the boys' parents came home, I told them right away. The look on their faces when I mentioned Michael's behavior made me instantly regret mentioning anything. They paid me without saying a word, and Mr. Miller asked me to leave. He said that they appreciated all the times that I babysat for them, but not to expect any more calls from them. I walked out of the house, stunned. I had no idea what would make them act like that. The next weekend, I was at another neighbor's house, the Howards, to babysit, and asked them if there was any reason that trying to talk to the Millers about Michael would bother them. I sat horrified as Mrs. Howard told me the story of how, 3 years ago, Michael had gotten hit and killed by a car after running into the road right in front of their house. I don't know how to explain what I saw so many times at the Millers, but needless to say, I quit doing any kind of babysitting job after that. I am currently doing online college mostly because I'm not a people person. It's pretty easy staying home and doing my schoolwork online. Even though it's cheaper to do it online, I still try to make money. I usually will babysit for people for $10 an hour, and I've made over $140 doing it. My dad told me a man he works with is taking his wife on a date Saturday night. He needs someone to babysit their son while they are out. My dad gave me the address, and Saturday night I would be watching this couple's son. When Saturday came, I drove to the couple's house, and when I got there, I saw they had a big house. I went up to the door and knocked. The door quickly opened. I saw a man standing there who looked to be in his late 40s, dressed up like he was going to the ball. "Hello, you must be Frank's daughter," He gave off a creepy smile before inviting me in. The house looked even bigger from the inside. Just then, his wife came downstairs. She was old, but tried to look young. He took his wife's hand and quickly tried to get her out the door. "Well, be back by 9:30. He then slammed the door shut and they drove off. Confused by why they tried to leave so fast, I decided to sit on their big couch and texted my friend. Eventually, I heard their son calling out for me, so I went upstairs. When I got to the door, I knocked on it, asking what he needs. "I'm hungry," he screamed. I went downstairs to get his food, and when I opened the fridge, a horrible smell blasted into my face. I looked and saw a bunch of flies and raw, bloody food. There were raw pork chops, or what I hoped to be with his name on it. So I brought it to him while almost puking from the smell. I knocked on the door, telling him I had his food, and it slightly opened and a hand grabbed it. The door slammed shut, and I heard him eating it on the other side, and at that point, I wanted to leave. I sat back on the couch and texted my friend about what just happened, but she didn't believe me. I don't know when, but I eventually fell asleep on the couch. I woke up to a slamming noise. I thought it was the sun, so I went upstairs and saw the door open. I saw a bunch of plates lying on his floor with flies everywhere. I went back downstairs and heard noises coming from the kitchen. When I peeked in, I almost screamed. There was someone who was 8 feet tall eating raw, bloody meat from the fridge. I tried to leave, but I bumped into a vase that fell over and shattered. He looked over at me and yelled, "Me was hungry and you didn't give me food." I realized this was the couple's son. He started drooling and said, "Me eat you." I tried to run, but his long arm grabbed me and wouldn't let go. So I grabbed a piece of the broken vase and stabbed his arm. He let go of me and screamed, but I got the fuck out of there. I ran to the neighbor's house trying to get help. They eventually came out and called the cops. The cops eventually arrived, and when they went in, they didn't find anyone in the house, but they noticed the back door was open. I told them about the parents, but they couldn't get a hold of them and they haven't found them yet. To this day, I haven't babysat for anyone, and I'm scared of leaving the house because I fear running into that 8-foot giant. I was about 14, and I was babysitting 2 boys for some church members. I had done it before, and the kids loved me and the parents were very comfortable with me. This was a night where they were going to be gone for pretty much until like 2:30 in the morning. I was doing it for free that day because they were going to do something church-related, and that's just how I rolled. Anyway, the house they lived in was an apartment complex. You know, one of those small ones that had 2 floors and 4 places in each spot. They're on the bottom floor with 2 bedrooms on either side of the apartment, with the kitchen on the left and the living room on the right, with the sliding glass door to a small patio and a public bathroom next to the front door. It was about, I think, 1:30, and I knew they would be getting home soon. The kids were knocked out, obviously after practically begging and 3 bedtime stories, and I had finished my homework. They didn't have cable. This was before Netflix became an online service, so they had a couple of DVDs and VHS to watch, so I grabbed Land Before Time to make the night go quicker. I was already very tired and had nodded off a couple of times. About 2, I could hear knocking on the front door. Knowing the parents had a key, I did nothing but sit there in the dark with the TV glowing. Being a paranoid person who watches and reads enough horror, I grabbed the baseball bat that was next to the couch, and what happened next will haunt me forever. I heard a small voice, almost like a young woman's, "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart stopped, and I realized the patio door didn't have the blinds shut. My eyes shift slowly to the door, and I see someone on the patio staring in. I couldn't make anything out other than they were very short and wide. I screamed and ran into the kids' room. Thankfully, they were still asleep. Sadly, this was before I had a cell phone, and there were no cordless phones. All I did was push the dresser in front of the door and stared at the one window of the room. That's when it became dark as a shadow loomed on the window. The knocking started again, and the woman's voice called out, "Come on, dearie, I won't hurt you. Please come out." The window was being knocked so hard I was afraid it would break. The kids finally woke up and they were screaming and scared. I was a big girl and could at that time lift my own weight, but knowing I had 2 kids with me, I became vulnerable and afraid. Within 2 seconds, I hear the father yell out, "Hey, who the hell are you?" And the person ran off. The front door opened, and there was harsh knocking on the kids' bedroom door. Thankfully, it was the parents, and after I let them in and put the dresser back, I explained what happened, and they called the police. When they arrived, they found nothing but the bushes that hide the patio were cut up and ripped up to get through. I babysat for them once more after that, but after they moved away about 5 months later, I never babysat anyone ever again. And again to this day, I know the woman was long gone, but every time I hear a knock, a chill runs through me.